right, good morning or afternoon everybody. This is Mark Hamlin here, and today I'm going to take you through a quick walkthrough of our Product Configurator. The session is intended to last about a half hour, 45 minutes, somewhere in that time frame. And we like to keep it as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions about anything we're going through, feel free to use the question box within GoToWebinar, and I'll do my best to answer the questions as we go, or you can save them up until the end of the presentation. I'm going to go through a very quick PowerPoint here, just to sort of set the stage a little bit, and then we'll jump right into the software demo. So if you don't know who InsightWorks is, or who we are, we build add-ons for Business Central and Nav, both cloud and on-premises. We're based in Canada. We have other offices across Canada, in the US, and now also in Europe as well. Everything we do is pretty much done through our resellers. And if you go to the website, you can find our partners that we work with. If you have any questions, if you need quoting or pricing or any of that sort of thing, go ahead and contact your partner, and they'll be able to help you out or get in touch with us. If your partner isn't one of our resellers, go ahead and get a hold of them anyway, and they'll be able to get in touch with us. But if you do have questions and you want to ask us directly, that's fine as well. All right, now a little bit about our product line. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of this, and then we'll jump right into the configurator. So, these are some of the major products we have. Most of these are available for Business Central Cloud. So if you're on the cloud version of Business Central, you can get most of these there. And they're all available on the on-premises version as well for Nav, typically 2013 and up. Some of these will work with 2009, but 2013 and up, including Business Central Cloud. So the first one here, Warehouse Insight, that's mobile data collection. You can scan things in the warehouse, receiving, putaways, picks, all of those sorts of things, build your own apps on the handhelds. That's what that guy is for. We do have a webinar for that coming up maybe later this week or next week. Dynamic Ship is integrated shipping. So if you need to get UPS labels, FedEx labels, do rate shopping, send tracking emails, do LTL shipping, any of that type of stuff, Dynamic Ship is the guy for you. That also integrates with Warehouse Insight if you want. They are separate, but if you need to use it with the WMS, you can as well. Advanced Inventory Count. If you have any amount of inventory, you pretty much need this Advanced Inventory Count. The standard Nav or Business Central count capabilities, even with the new stuff they've got on Business Central, just doesn't quite cut it. This will take you to sort of the next level on your inventory counts, really pay for itself the first time you use it. Shop Floor Insight and MX APS, that's if you're a manufacturer. And, when we talk about configurator in a moment, you might be configuring things that you manufacture, and you may want to record, labor time and quality and consumption and output, and, look at your schedule and all those sorts of things. That's what Shop Floor Insight is for. So it's, capturing labor time through barcodes or touch screen, and presenting the schedule, those types of things is what it's intended for. MX APS will actually do the schedule for you, so it'll, you pass it in all the production orders and everything from Business Central or Nav, your capacities, your labor, your material constraints, all of that sort of thing, and it'll generate a schedule you can actually execute. And then you can use Shop Floor Insight to view that schedule and record time and material against it. Counter sales is industrial point of sale. So if you're a manufacturer, a distributor that has a parts counter that people can walk up and buy stuff over the counter, that would be the guy for you. So it's built into Business Central or Nav, and allows you to, scan UPC codes for point of sale, to take deposits, to take multiple payment methods per order, all those sorts of things you need in a point of sale package, but built for, sort of counter sales. Configurator we're going to go through today. Advanced Planning Worksheet. If you're running MRP, especially if you're a distributor, this is the guy that you need to simplify your MRPs. So if you're running standard Nav MRP, it just gives you a better sort of dashboard to do your planning from. And if you're a distributor, it incorporates alternate planning logic to do a better job of planning for distribution. Last one I'll mention today is Nav Extender. If you're running the Windows client, Windows version of Nav or Business Central, this is a free tool. You just go to navextender.com, you download it, you run it, and you can now drag and drop anything into any page within Nav or Business Central. You don't need to modify Nav or Business Central for it to work. You run it, you do the install, 5 minutes later you're dragging and dropping into the system. And it's completely free. There's no license or modifications or anything required. You just go to town and you're set. All right, so that's a little bit on the products. What we're going to be talking today, of course, is the product configurator and a little bit on positioning. So, obviously you're able to go in there and, configure products, assembly BOMs and production BOMs and routings. And there's lots of configurators out there that can do somewhat similar things, anywhere from sort of the lighter guys all the way up to big guys like Explogix and Econ and things like that. So where we fit is, we're not going to provide all the fancy features of the big guys, but we take you quite a bit of the way there at a very good price. So for really a very small percentage of what you would spend on one of the larger configurators, you get actually a fairly significant portion of that capability as far as being able to build up your BOMs and your routings and assembly BOMs and sub-configurations and things like that. So rather than just babble and talk about it, I'll actually show you how that works. So with that, we'll jump right into the demo and start having a look at how the thing works. Now, this is the department menu for the configurator in the system. And it's very easy. You can see there's not a lot here. It's very easy to set up and configure. So one of the biggest costs when you go to a configurator is really on the end user side, coming up with all the configurations and the rules and everything else. So we've simplified that down quite a bit to make it quite easy to build up configurations. And I'll show you how that works. We're going to start with the item categories, and I'll give you a quick overview of how we set this up, and then we'll jump into a sales quote or a sales order and build up some configurations. So where we start is with this item categories. So that's really your entry point into the configuration. And what that does is it allows you to list all the different types of product you're configuring. So, in the newer versions of Nav where you have the hierarchical item categories, that works very well here. And, let's say I sell bikes or something like that. I might have 20 different models of bike that I can configure. Well, I'd have those 20 different types of items I can configure here, or if you're a boat manufacturer or something like that, I might have 20 different lines of boat that I configure, or whatever you need to do, or desks or doors or wall panels or whatever you run into. So we start here, and you list all of those different types of items you're going to configure with a few different options. So the number series that we use, the data template. So the data template is the standard Nav capability where you can, define defaults for all the fields and everything when you create that configuration. And whether it's a production BOM or an assembly BOM. Okay, so we do support both. And if it's a production BOM, we can also configure routings. So there's a number of different ways we can get into routings. I'll talk about that in a moment as well. But you can start with a base routing. So, for example, every mountain bike has sort of a standard routing that you always follow, but some of the choices I make may alter that base routing, and we'll create a new routing based on this base one. And you can also have a routing here that allows you to choose as options specific operations you want to incorporate. And a few other things. The item description, that allows you to set up a little rule to build up the description for the configuration that you create, and a few other things. So very basic. You list your item categories here, whether it's production or assembly. That's really what it boils down to. And then you go in and you configure what you want that thing to look like. So when we go into the configurator options, I'll show you a few things on this. First of all, this particular mountain bike, we always have a base bill of materials. So we're not going to configure every single item on this particular mountain bike. Every mountain bike is going to have, certain base components, a certain frame, nuts, bolts, chain, that sort of thing. And that's all incorporated in the base BOM, and that's going to be hidden. So the user isn't going to be able to select it. We're going to start out with the base, and then we're going to have all of these things that we can actually go in and configure. So for example, on the seat, I've got a couple of options listed here. I've got a saddle and a gel saddle, handlebars, that sort of thing. And you'll notice here's one where we've got a subcomponent tied directly to the type of handlebars. So when I choose this 1801 aluminum handlebars here, you notice this parent choice code is set to 1801, it's automatically going to pull in that brake if I choose the aluminum handlebars. So it's going to build up a BOM that brings in a brake when I choose the aluminum handlebars. So that's one of the things you can do. And what this also allows you to do is bring in things like additional labor, not just additional components. So the type of choice that you have here, it can be an item, so that's a standard component, but it can also be, a production BOM if you've got numerous components you want to bring in. It can be a resource if you're doing the assembly BOMs. That can, you can use that to incorporate labor or whatever else you like. It can be an operation. So what that means is maybe when I choose aluminum handlebars, I want to add additional operation for whatever. Maybe they need to be drilled out or something like that. So I can actually tie an operation to a specific component choice, or vice versa. I could actually make an operation a selection within the configurator. So for example, let's say I have a mounting bracket on something, and I have the option of having a drilled mounting bracket or just a plain mounting bracket, or maybe I weld tabs onto it. Well, we're not changing the components in a case like that. All we're doing is really adding labor to drill out that existing component. So you can actually create an option, a selection to choose from that is actually just labor. It doesn't have to be a component. Okay? Or again, I can tie that labor to a component that I select. We can also choose text, and text is good. It works in a number of different ways. So for example, if this is an assembly BOM, that text just shows up in the assembly BOM as informational text. If you're building up a routing, that'll show up on, if you're using the routing link code, that'll show up as a special instruction on that particular operation you've tied it to, or it'll just show up as a routing comment as well. So you can use that to generate work instructions and those sorts of things. And of course, we can choose a full routing as well if you need to choose multiple operations. And we can also do sub-configurations, which means if you have a hierarchical configuration, I'll show you that in a moment with a different item here, but and that'll be the desk where, I've got a desk that I configure, but I've got another kit that's maybe, a number of other things that go with that desk that I also want to do another configuration for. And an example, let's say I'm building, a truck or something like that. Well, the engine might be a sub-configuration. So I've got all the stuff I want to configure for the truck, and then I've got another thing, which is the engine, that can also have a bunch of different options. Well, that can be a sub-configuration within the system. And I'll show you how that works in a moment here as well. All right, so there's quite a bit you can do on these choices as well. So I'll just bring up the whole thing. So we went through the different types and everything else. How we link it, default quantities, those types of things. And this calculation formula, I'm going to show you in a moment. What that allows you to do is it allows you to use a formula to actually calculate the quantity that I want for a particular item. So I'm going to show you that in just a moment. But there's a whole bunch of things you can do here for setting up that choice and managing it as well. All right, so that's a little bit. This is the bike, the way we configure it. And I'll mention one last thing up at the top here. This bulk visibility or bulk edit visibility, this allows us, we have a spreadsheet view as well if you're configuring multiple items simultaneously, and this helps identify what we actually show within that bulk configuration window. Now the last thing I'll show you on this one before I jump into the desk is the choice combinations. So first of all, again, this is very basic. The only thing that's a little different on this is I'm pulling in a subcomponent automatically. But we can also set up rules that say, if I choose a specific choice here, I have to enable another choice or disable another choice. And that's the choice combinations. So this is where we can set up some rules. And I've got a very basic one on this one, and I'll show you some more complex ones. Where I can come in and say, hey, when I choose these handlebars, these 1801 handlebars, the aluminum handlebars, I want to include the lamp, and I'm going to automate that. So it's just going to drop that lamp right in as soon as I choose, these 1801 handlebars. And it's also saying, hey, if I choose this lamp, this 1500 lamp, I'm going to exclude the bell. So I can have the lamp, but if I choose a lamp, I can't have the bell. So you can set that up that enforces those rules, and it will prevent you from having incompatible choices when you're building up that BOM. So these choice combinations allow you to do that and a few other things. So let me actually back out of the mountain bike for a second. We're going to go into the desk. Same idea, exactly. Now the desk has a few other little goodies associated with it. So let's first go into those choice combinations again, and I'll show you a couple of things here. First of all, the first one is very much like we saw on the other one. What it's going to do is, as soon as I change something on the panel, what it's going to do is it's going to calculate the height based on this formula. So it's going to use the length times 2 plus 1. And that length is just a variable that's defined as one of your options. And on this one, I also say, hey, if the panel length is greater than 10 or 10 or greater, I'm going to force people to have shelves. And I'm going to set the default quantity for those shelves as length divided by 2. So these formulas, you can actually do quite a bit. You can use things like min, max, you can use absolute, you can do a bunch of stuff rounding. There's a whole bunch of functions you can use within the formulas as well. But basically, we're just taking the variables that we've defined as options, and you can use them in a formula here. And then the last one here is every time I change anything to do with the panel length, I'm going to change the quantity of the trim to this specific formula. Okay, so that's using some of the formulas within the system. Now, if we go back to the options themselves and we look at the length, we've got a few things here that are somewhat unique. First of all, we've got that same thing where we've got the parent choice code. So as soon as I do something on the length, it's automatically going to pull in all of these other options for me, just because they're tied to that parent choice. On this particular one, though, the base, we've also got a formula here. So when it pulls in that base, it's going to use the minimum of 10 or the length plus 1 times 2. So that's where we use that child calculation formula. So if I entered a quantity of whatever in here, 15, it's going to run this calculation and it's going to use that length for the base automatically. All right, no questions yet, which either means I'm confusing people or it's just so cool you can't touch the keyboard. You're so amazed. At any rate, that's the basics. Oh, and down here, the last one, this is one where we've got a configuration where this is going to be a sub-configuration. So when I actually run, go to build this configuration, if I choose the desk options as an option, it's going to go in and it's going to allow me to do that sub-configuration, which if I move this down, is this desk options configuration. And I'm going to show you how that works in just a sec here. All right, so that's the basics. That's really all you have to do to set it up. It's actually very simple. You come in here, you list all your different options that you want to have for that particular product type. For each option, you come in and you list all the choices for that particular option, and they can be, again, whatever you like. In this case, it's just text, so that's going to end up as being a special instruction on the BOM rather than a component or anything. And again, you just enter all the different things that you can choose from, and you're done, right? And then maybe some formulas and exclusion and inclusion rules. Now, these choice combinations, you can actually do quite a bit with them. You can create sort of hidden variables. You can do all sorts of fun stuff to manage it to a large extent straight through with this configuration. But let's say you run into an issue that you want to say, hey, if the height is greater than 20 and the trim is included and something else, then I want to do this. Well, that's hard to do here, but we have the ability to write, I'm using air quotes here, write script to allow you to manage those types of rules. So what I'll do is I'm just going to go into the dev environment here. This is 2017 or whatever. And I'll just show you. This is actually in a report. So this allows end users, right, people that don't have a developer license, to come in here and write, again, air quotes script. So either CAL, or if you're doing this in the cloud version, AL, you can come in and do things like, hey, if the quantity of the length is greater than 25 and the choice for trim isn't blank, then I want to set the corner to be round, right? So that's the type of script you can write. It's actually very easy to do. Your partner can do it, we can do it, or you can learn to do it yourself. It's really not that tough to be able to build these types of rules if you want to code them versus just do them in that choice combinations view. Okay, now That was a lot of stuff. And really, you just went through the entire configurator training. So now when you buy it, you don't even need training. You've just gone through it. That's basically how you set the thing up and use it, or at least set it up to be able to be used. Now, after you've done all that, what we want to do, where you would use this, there's a couple of ways. Well, first of all, I should have mentioned I can come in here at any point. I can hit test configuration. I can launch the configurator, and I can test that and build things. But we're going to go into the sales quote and see what the results of this actually look like in a sales quote or sales order. You can do it in a quote or an order. So I'm going to go into the sales quotes. I'll just choose this guy here rather than start from scratch. So we come in and we've got this configurator button here. If you're running the older versions of Nav or Business Central, if it's not cloud, this is really the only modification that's required to the base Nav or Business Central code. It's just adding these buttons. Everything else is completely separate. It still, of course, runs in the same database and everything else, but we don't touch any of the base Nav logic or code. So when I come in here and I hit configurator, let's say somebody walks in and they want to buy a bike. I hit configurator. I now can come in and choose what I want to build, and we're just going to say the mountain bike. And here again, I've got all my different choices. So if I choose the aluminum handlebars, if you recall, as soon as I do that, it forces me to buy the lamp at the same time. So I can come in here and maybe I want to buy 2 lamps, and maybe I want to make the color red or whatever. Now these guys in bold here, those are mandatory. That's just a flag you set in the options. And you notice some of them came up with default values. You set that up in the options as well. So I've basically built my configuration. I want these things here, and when I hit OK, it won't amaze you. Well, maybe it will, but basically what it did was it created that that configuration for me, built up my description. The extended text that it generates here, you have full control over that as well, and your choices. You can decide what shows up as extended text or not, and what description to use, and that's basically it. And that's how I've configured it. Now let's say somebody comes in and says, well, actually, you know what, I really only want the 1 lamp. So I come in here, I hit configurator again, and now if I change this to 1 lamp, okay, it'll just update that guy. And you'll notice what it did was it went and found one that's already being built. So what it's doing is it's actually, this happens to be an assembly BOM item. So it's creating a new assembly BOM, which means it's creating a new item each time. And people always ask, does it have to create a new item? Can't it just create a new BOM? Well, when we're talking about assembly, yes, it pretty much has to create a new item anyway. But the advantage of that is now standard MRP is going to run, right? Nothing in Nav changes. Everything works because we've just got an item that we're using. Even with production BOM, we've just got an item, standard MRP runs. Everything works exactly the same. I've just been able to go in and configure that more easily than having to do a search through the item list. And in this case, when I changed that configuration to use 1 lamp, it actually found this configuration. We've actually built this before, and it brought up that old item number instead of creating a new one. So if we've already done a configuration before, it'll find it and reuse an existing configuration rather than build something new from scratch. Okay. Now, and I actually lied. This isn't an assembly BOM. This is actually a production BOM. So if we actually go into this item here, so we'll just go into advanced, that particular item. Now again, I only chose 3 options when I did that configuration. But if we look at what it actually built for us and expand that out, we can see it actually did build the entire BOM and routing and everything we need to produce that bike. And we've just got the stuff that we chose as options at the end, right? So very easy to do that configuration from a salesperson perspective. They simply come in here, they hit configurator, they choose what they're building, they make the choices, hit OK, and we're done. Now, let me show you a little bit on a desk, right? So we come in here and I'm going to configure a desk, and I'm going to choose, let's say a maple guy. And this one has a few more rules associated with it. So for example, if I go with a 10-foot length, it's going to bring in those shelves automatically, right? So that was one of the rules that we had set up. If I'm at 10 feet or greater, it forces me to use shelves. If I include trim, it's going to calculate the trim. And down in here, we've got the options. and this was a sub-configuration. So what that allows me to do is come in and say, yeah, I want to build a desk, but I've got a separate kit that I build independently that I ship with the desk, like a bag of parts, right? And that bag of parts is going to have a bunch of stuff. So if I actually come in here and choose these options, what it will do is it launches another, what we call a Configurator Bom Designer, to allow me to specify which options I want to use for this particular desk. Okay, so I can come in here, configure this guy, and we're good. And then if I want to change it, I've made a mistake or whatever, I can come back and then adjust this configuration, and it'll update my main bill. And depending on how you do that, that can either be brought in as part of the assembly BOM, or it can generate a separate production BOM or separate item for this particular sub-configuration. Okay. Now we did have a question, can it be used, I'm doing it from the standard sales quote and sales order, and the question is, can it be used with the web portal so that the customer can make their own configurations? So that is in the works. It's not there yet. Right now it's intended for use from within Business Central or Nav, but the external facing configurator is on its way. It'll be a different interface. It'll be more like a wizard interface rather than what you see here, but unlikely going to be this year, depending on a few variables, but it is on its way. All right, at any rate, that's how we build up a configuration of a desk. Now, the interesting thing about this is, a desk might be something that I might need to configure multiple times, right? Let's say somebody is coming in and they want to buy 10 desks for their office or something like that, or 10 doors or 100 wall panels or whatever you happen to be building. Well, there's a few things I can do. Because it's just an item, I can just take this, copy it, come in here, paste it, and then hit Configurator and reconfigure this to be something different if I didn't want this exact item. And by the way, that's another big advantage, of course, of using items, is you can do copy document. You can, if you know the item number because of a past sale or whatever, you can enter that in. Okay, but I don't want to do that because that would take me a lot of time. If I'm selling 10 desks, I don't want to copy paste every single time. What we can do is we can go into the bulk configure. Okay, so I choose that, and what it does is it'll load up sort of in a spreadsheet view, all of those same options I can choose based on what I've configured to be visible in this view. So, I've got the finish, the quantity for the length, the doors, things like that. So you can decide what you want to show in here and what you don't. And I've got the sales quantity. So let's say somebody phones up and they say they want 2 maple doors and they want 3 birch doors that are 8 feet long with, a drawer, 2 drawers or something like that. And then they want, 2 oak that are, 12 feet long with, good enough. That's all we need. And then what you do when you hit OK, and incidentally, you can go in, it calculates the price. I didn't mention that. Even on the other configurator view, it'll calculate the price and the cost and everything else based on the components. And in this particular one, you can actually come in and review it on a line-by-line basis. But once I've got this guy set up, so again, it's very much like a spreadsheet. I can just fill in everything I want. When I hit OK, it's going to come in, and you'll notice it's building all the assembly orders behind the scenes as it did that. And we've got all of our items on the sales order here configured and ready to go. And then even then, if I wanted to go and adjust these, I can come in, go and bulk configure. It'll load those all up from the sales order, and I can make adjustments or add additional items or whatever I like. So that view is actually very nice, again, if you're in a situation where you do have to sell multiple items, of the same type with slightly different configurations. Okay. And again, I can also configure these individually. If I choose an item that's configured, I can just go into Configurator here and just adjust that one specific item rather than go into that bulk configure and do them all at once. All right. So that's the basics of it. And again, it's very easy to set up and configure. Once it's done, well, actually, you know what? Let's actually come in here. I'll show you what this guy looks like just for fun. If we go into item structure here, again, this is what it's built for us, right? It's in this particular case, it's an assembly BOM. It's got all this stuff. It's calculated all these values out based on the configurations that we're in there, and that's basically what it's building for us. Now, back to what I was saying originally though, very easy to come in and configure. To get a desk built like that was almost no work. There's no coding or scripting or anything required. All we did was we come in, we said this is what we want the desk to look like, the description, and here's the things I can choose. This is that bulk editor to say what we want to show in that bulk editor, and I can come in here, define what the options are with a few options for configurations, and that's it, and you're set up and you're up and running. So from a deployment perspective, again, the biggest cost is often on the end users coming up with all these options and configurations and everything else. We make that very simple. You can load this up with Rapid Start. They could do it all in Excel, suck it in with Rapid Start, and they're up and running in very little time. The training for it is a few hours typically at most over the course of a period of time. Normally we do a 1 hour training session for you. You get up to speed, you start building it, and then we'll do some support as you're going through it. And there's a number of partners that use this as well and are able to do that for you directly rather than have us do it. And that's basically it. It's quick and easy to set up, easy to use, and with the ability to create these formulas and rules, it's actually very powerful. It takes you 80–90% of the way there most of the time for what people need to do. Okay, so clearly I had a lot of coffee. I was talking very quickly there. Hopefully that covered off all the questions that people had. I'm not sure if there are any other questions. If you do have questions, I'll give it a few minutes, but that's really all I was going to go through today and show and talk about. Okay, give it a minute or two, see if there's anything else. Otherwise, we finished in about half an hour, which is about right. Just as a reminder, we do 3 public webinars a week typically on the various products. We've got Warehouse Insight, Shop Floor, Dynamic Ship, and a few others coming up. Check our website if you're interested in any of those. We also do have recordings for all of these as well. And it looks like somebody raised their hand. I'm not sure if I'll be able to unmute you. You may actually have to type in your question. I'm not sure if I can actually unmute you to ask your question. Let me try. Yeah, you asked a question. Good. Just found the typing spot. Awesome. Okay, so we have another question before that one. What is available? What is the implementation time requirement? Again, it's typically about half a day of our time. That includes, sort of the initial setup, the initial training, and support until you're comfortable with building your own configurations. So your partner will likely want to help you with that. Like you may need more support and discussions with your partner. So your partner may add additional time to that. But from us, we're typically talking, half a day. And you'll be up and running, or at least you'll be on your way to getting your items configured. As far as the average timeline, so again, that's about half a day roughly. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's a couple days. That's typically spread out over a few weeks while you get used to the system and you start building your configurations, and you may run into questions and things like that. The amount of time it takes to from the start of the project till you're live really depends on the number of configurations you have and how complicated they are. Okay. Can you add this to the quote so we can see the final result on the quotation? Yeah, so when I was in that sales quote here, now I'm in the Windows client. Again, it is available in Business Central if you're on Business Central. But this guy here is my sales quote, and of course, I don't think I have anything different than the standard Nav in this case, or Business Central sales quote available. Yeah, and I didn't have the default set up, so it didn't have a tax group on this particular item or whatever. But this is my sales quote here, right? So this is me adding the configurations to the sales quote here. And in Business Central, I should mention actually, it is available in Business Central, so you can go in and install it. You can do the trial. The version on Business Central is version 1. What you just saw was version 2. That's available for the on-premises stuff right now only. That's coming to Business Central within the next month or two. Currently, if you go into Business Central, the things that are missing out of the version on Business Central, or I should say App Source, are the formulas and those combination rules. Everything else is there. Okay, so the Business Central Cloud version currently doesn't have the formulas and the combination rules. They will be there in the next month or so. Everything else is available for the on-premises version. Okay, and another question. Does a production order going to the floor look like a standard Nav production order? Absolutely, because what I've done is, like this mountain bike here, I've gone in, I've built that particular item. If we open it up, we open up the item card. What it's done is it's built a routing and a BOM for that particular item. So MRP is going to work normally. Everything's going to work normally. There's no special linkage we need to do from the sales order to the configuration to the production order, any of that stuff. It's all just stock Nav at that point, right? And by the way, this routing number, you can use a generic routing as well. You don't have to have it build a custom routing for every configuration. That's dependent on how you set it up. All right. Okay, any other questions on this at all? Now, as far as pricing, again, check with your partner for pricing, but it is definitely a very small percentage of what you'd find with the larger scale configurators. You know, technically it doesn't do as much. For example, it doesn't currently have the web portal and a few other things. But if you need to be able to build products easily based on option selections or calculations or even script, then this guy will actually likely suit your needs. A couple other questions. You have a data sheet that you send to the client. So I'm not sure what that means. If you have a data sheet, you mean you're sending them something to fill out in a spreadsheet that says I want this, this, this. Technically, you could do that. I mean, probably the easiest way would be, or do you mean that once you print it out, you include a data sheet of what was configured? That's probably what you meant. Yeah, so because we're generating that item, you can either do it as extended text. You could list everything here from a data sheet perspective. You can have a custom report that reports on what was built in that configuration. So, for example, you have access within Nav to all of this information. If you want to send out a data sheet that looked just like this, that would be a custom report in Nav, but you have access to all that data. You can build that up, send it out. You'd incorporate this with a quote or whatever you want. Okay, but that would be, again, you'd probably get your partner to do that. They'd build up a custom report or a custom page for your quote that incorporates whatever information you want to include on that data sheet. Okay. Right now, it's sort of maybe a poor man's version of that. It's just the extended text, which sort of lays out what's included in that particular configuration. And again, you have control over what shows up in the extended text here as well through the configuration. All right. Cool. I like questions. Anything else? You could ask me how my weekend was. It was pretty good. Nothing else? Okay, great. I appreciate it, everybody. This presentation may be loaded up on the website as a recording later. If not, I believe there are recordings on the website with similar content to this that you can share if you need to. And again, feel free to contact us if you have questions, but your partner is typically who we're going to be working to. And I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel.